welcome to another episode of For the Love of Marketing. How are you feeling today?
All right, thank you. Yeah, it's Friday, sun's out, it's all good.
Yeah, and it's raining in India, so it's a huge relief.
Oh, that's
all
nice.
Happy people.
It's been hot over there, right?
It was such a big relief. Finally, some rain. So today I wanted to talk to you about content pruning. So something new that I came across, which is very exciting, and I think a lot of people do not know about it. People work very hard on building new content, but they often forget to see what they have done in the past. And so what do you think about content pruning, what it is, and what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, content pruning is a really interesting part of SEO. I mean, it's not just the pruning. I think that's the first point to make is that, content marketing is a huge area, I think, as everyone working in marketing knows, and it has so many different angles to it. Of course, social media as well, of course, SEO is another, and many other areas besides. But as a result, many companies are investing multiple millions or as much as they can in developing really great content. And if you do that well and you follow the models from my books and from various other places online, you will produce very good, relevant, timely content, and that's great. That's excellent for SEO, but more importantly, it's excellent for your user, which is of course who you should be focused on, your audience, your customer. So great, you have this wealth of content, that's fantastic, but then over a period of time, some of that content will become less relevant. It might have statistics that are out of date in it. It might have processes that don't work anymore. It might refer to platforms that don't exist anymore. It might talk about geographic or political situations that have significantly changed. So things will become less relevant over time. Now, that means those pages really aren't any good for the user anymore. And if they're no good for the user anymore, then the search engines are ultimately going to recognize that, say, okay, this page is not relevant, right? People are not finding this page useful. It's not really got the context that people are looking for anymore. So there's a number of different actions that, from an SEO perspective, you really should be taking on old content. And one of those is pruning, right? Which is really just getting rid of it, right? So sometimes it makes sense to just remove old content. Now, this shouldn't be your starting place, right? This shouldn't be your starting place. Often old content can be updated. Often you can go into old content, you can make those changes to update the processes, update the platforms, to update the statistics. And that can be really beneficial. If you do that and then you push another crawl through there, or it happens naturally anyway, then that page is suddenly going to become a lot more relevant. That's going to help your SEO score. And consider the fact that search engines, when they're looking across your whole site, if your whole site has got really good relevant content, that's very strong. If half of it's good relevant content and half of it is outdated and not particularly great content anymore, then it's not as strong. So you need to decide what you're doing with that half. So if you can do that updating, that makes a big difference. It takes time, of course. On top of your writing and everything else you're doing, you suddenly got to go back and rewrite things you've already written before. So there's a bit of a question around resourcing and what you do with that. So that's it's not perhaps top of the list from a content SEO perspective, but it is hugely beneficial to do it. The other thing is to consider what you prune and what you don't, what you prune and what you update, right? And I think that's where the line is difficult. It's easy to just say, oh gosh, this is a lot of work to update this, I'm just going to get rid of it, and it's understandable, and if you do that, that could well help you. But keep in mind that, as I say, if you can update an old piece to make it more relevant, that's going to be better for you than just switching it off. So try and focus on the updates. But if you do have a piece that just is not relevant anymore, is outdated, is never going to be right, it's going to be detracting from your site, or perhaps you've written a bunch of content when you first started your site that you've learned since it's just not a great way to write content. It was too short, it didn't really say enough, it wasn't really relevant, or maybe your products have changed and some of that content just isn't very relevant to what you do anymore. Things like that. Sometimes it will be a case of we need to get rid of this. And when you do that, it's the safe thing to do is just unpublish that content, remove it. But when you do that, keep some considerations in mind. So if you are going to remove content, think about what if someone has linked into that content? What if someone has bookmarked that content in the past? There's a possibility there that, and of course that page has been crawled as well in the past. There is a possibility here you're just going to leave a dead end on your website, which you don't want to do. So make sure you're using redirects to push any URLs you take down off to somewhere else, whether that be the blog page or the home page or a similar relevant page on your site. Make sure that's a 301 redirect, so you retain the SEO value, but don't leave a dead page with a 404 message on it on your site, because that obviously is a negative value. So yeah, content pruning is one of those things that it's not particularly difficult technique, but it is one that gets missed, I think, a lot. As everyone focuses on putting great new content on their website, they forget that they've probably got 1,000 pages of old content that, if they just pruned and improved, could have a really positive impact on their overall SEO scores as well. So yeah, really helpful technique.
Yeah, and with Google's new approach to SEO with their EAT principle, I think this will be all the more relevant to see, like, people should actually derive value from your content. But in the long run, this is not a show, like a one-time process. You have to keep doing it until your website is live. So in the long run, is it worth it to keep make new content and keep up with the old content? And it's just so fast moving. It's just extra pressure on your team, or it'll pay off in the long run?
Yeah, it will pay off. I mean, EAT is a good point to bring up there. I think that's a great shout, Nam. I think that expertise, authority, and trustworthiness, I think those pieces are demonstrated through the wealth of relevant content that users ultimately are finding helpful and engaging with on your website, and other people are saying, okay, look, this is worth me linking to and pointing out as a real source of expertise. And you're only going to achieve that if all of your content is good and relevant. And as you back up huge amounts of content over a long period of time, some of it is naturally going to become less relevant. So yeah, I think content pruning is important. Now, like I say, it comes down to really the size of your team and the resources that you've got, and whether you're using an SEO agency or a content agency. And this is sort of the exercises that we do for our clients, as well as, of course, for ourselves. But I think that if you are a very content focused company, which as I say, many, if not most, nowadays are, or at least should be, then it is definitely something that you should be looking at. Now, like I say, it wouldn't be top of the list. Producing really good content, making sure your site is, of course, technically optimized, making sure you've got really compelling content that can attract links and link bait. That is those two things are really sort of really core focus. Definitely, of course, making sure you've got your metrics and your measurement in place. All those elements would be critical. And of course, trying to own the SERPs as well would be another you really want to focus on, structured data and schema, that sort of thing. So I think that those would be probably the higher priority than pruning and updating old content. But if you can find the time and the resources to go through this exercise, then it's definitely a really beneficial thing to do. So I think whether you've got the resources now or not, it should be on your agenda of SEO actions to make sure you prune and update old content. And then how you manage that is going to be different for each company.
So do you think there is an approach that we can take with our present content, and while coming up with new content, is there a way that we can make it timeless so that the whole process of content pruning can be avoided?
Yeah.
There is an approach?
Yeah, good question. So I think evergreen content is always great. If you can produce content that is never going to go out of date, that's great, right? Now it's a good technique to do. It's low maintenance. There are some things that are just always going to be true, right? I mean, humans need air and water, right? I think that's pretty critical. That's unlikely to change. If you're writing an article about that, you're probably safe for a good long time yet, I think. Hopefully that's always going to be the case anyway, who knows, but certainly there are some areas that surely, evergreen content is great. It will stay that way forever and you won't need to update it. However, naturally, you can't just write content that is going to remain the same all the time. If you want to write about things that are current, things that are timely, they're most likely going to change. So the real power is getting onto a trend, onto a topic that is big at the moment, and talking about that. If you can become an authority on a topic that is big and compelling and current, and you can talk about that through your website, through social media, you're going to get a lot more engagement, a lot more interest from people than talking about something that's always been the same way. Because in most industries, people will over a period of time learn what has always been that way. What they need to know is from an expert what's current, what's new, what's changing, what's coming, what should they be aware of. So so it's not entirely true, but I think evergreen content is very relevant and a good thing to keep as a mix within your content. But the really powerful stuff is the timely stuff, but unfortunately that's also the stuff that goes out of date. So yeah, it's a mix.
So as a content writer myself, I would never be able to let go of content. Like everything is precious to me because I write it. So what advice will you give to people when they're pruning, like how to let go of content, like which content should go and what content should stay, that kind of thing? What advice would you give?
So I think that my advice to everyone thinking about it, and to you now as well, is not to make emotional decisions about your content. It's just a hard thing to do, right? Anything that has a creative, artistic angle to it, people naturally have a bit of an emotional reaction to, right? The style of someone's writing, as you know, I paint very badly, right? People have emotional reactions to my painting. Normally they cry with depression, but it is an emotional area. So when you're making decisions about something you've written, you might have really loved writing that piece, but it might just be fundamentally wrong now, right? So that's not to say that you necessarily have to delete it. It might be a case of you can make small updates to that page, but it's more likely that you just need to rewrite it. So you can see that as a positive thing. So we still need a piece of content in this area. It's just that this article is completely wrong. So maybe this needs pruning and redirecting. Maybe it doesn't, but you're looking at the data signals on that, looking at what we think is relevant in the world right now. Is this wrong? Let's take it down, and let's write a new article on this specific area to bring it up to date and redirect the old one to the new one. That's absolutely a relevant way to do it, and then that gives you, the emotional positive side of being able to write a new article and improve on what you did last time. But yeah, it can't be I loved writing this article, we want to keep it up. That's not a relevant decision, right? We need to make cold analytical decisions about what works and what's relevant and what's timely and what's not. So yeah, I think the key thing really is when analyzing whether a piece of content should stay, is it still relevant? Are we still getting traffic to this? Are we getting a big bounce rate from this because people just are not finding it relevant anymore? The time on page is a good signal for how far people are getting through that piece of content as well. If you've written a couple of thousand words and people are spending 30 seconds on the page, they're not reading it. So it's not working. And of course you will have stats and obvious elements within that page that are just out of date. You may have broken links in there, which of course you need to update as well. Or remove. So there are very clear signals around the technical setup, the stats, the quotes you've got in there, the brands you're mentioning, the products you're selling, the news headlines, the political status of the world, the things you're referencing that just aren't relevant, and using your analytics as an overlay on that to say this is working, this isn't working, is where you should be coming from your decisions, rather than I love the way this phrase is in this, and so I really want to keep it. Because as nice as that is, take that phrase and put it on a more relevant page.
Yeah, it's like cleaning up your closet, but the whole world can see it. So it's a different approach.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Mother's Day is coming, and right now there's a lot of conversation going around supporting mothers, and especially in UK, I saw some posts where they talked about how mothers in UK are not feeling as supported as they can be. So as CEO of a company, what do you think we as a society and we all can do to support mothers better and give them more
Yeah, I mean, it's a great
strength.
question. You know,
Yeah.
Mother's Day is coming in the US. We had it in the UK. The UK Mother's Day was back in March. So, you know, for me, yeah, Mother's Day is an important day. You know, surprisingly, I have a mother. I think many people do. So you know, yeah, it's a time to really celebrate, yeah, people who have given their all to us, right? And I think that's you know, as a parent myself, not a mother obviously, but as a parent myself, you know, I understand how much hard work mothers put in, a lot more than fathers, often, not always, but often. You know, I know how much hard work mothers put in, and you know, there are some phenomenal women out there doing some great work in all areas of business, and it's great to have seen the progress over the last, I guess, the last 20-30 years, especially in this area. You know, I think I see a lot of companies now offering improved terms around maternity leave, a lot of support for bringing babies into work, support for, you know, helping people juggle what is very difficult. You know, it's easy to say, you know, I'm having a baby, I'm going to go and deal with my baby, and then I'll come back and deal with work when I can. But I think, you know, a lot of mums do want to work up until the last minute because they're passionate about what they do, have their baby and come back as soon as possible and crack on. And I think it's important for every business to be flexible enough to support mothers in being able to do that, right? And in whatever style they feel is right for them. And it's not the same. It's not a one size fits all. Everyone is different. Every mother, every person leads their life differently and has their own challenges. Some will have a support network of grandparents and friends who can help them. Some won't at all, and some will be single mothers, some will be married, some will be with a working husband, and some will be with a husband who has plenty of time or works shifts and is able to look after things. Life is different for everybody, and I think, you know, as a responsible CEO, it's important for you to say, okay, this is you know, the maternity offer we give, and we support through that, but also we support in coming back to work. And, you know, if we can introduce some kind of crash or just bring the baby into work, and we'll find ways to work it, and we'll have breastfeeding areas, and there's lots of things that can be done to support young mothers and older mothers, by the way. You know, I think when people think about mothers, they often think about the babies, but, you know, when you've got a child who's 5, 10, 15, there are different challenges with all those ages. It's not until they move out, and, you know, these days that's more like 30, 35. So, you know, it's not until they're adults that you can really you know, stop worrying about those things, or if you ever stop worrying as a parent. But no, I think for me the key thing is that we support women and mothers as much as we can in their duties. And you know, I would add to that it's also not, your Mother's Day is all about mothers, and it should be, but in terms of this point around supporting people in the office, we should think more broadly about parents as well. You know, there are plenty of you know, single dads, and obviously Father's Day is a separate day, so we're not focused on that. But there are other ways that, you know, businesses just need to consider parents rather than necessarily just mothers. You know, because it's that's still also something that many companies need to improve on, is how do we make sure that people can look after their family and their children in the way they need to. And more often than not, it's the mother that needs that support. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's the father that needs that support. But look, there are so many great mums out there doing fantastic things, and there are some brands making really good steps in this area, and I'm excited to see that. I just hope more companies do that. Unfortunately, I have met and known several companies in fairly recent times that have still been very frustrated with people for going on maternity leave, and not wanting to give any flexibility to people to look after their children, and just said, oh, they can get a nanny or something, which is a really disrespectful and inconsiderate way of behaving. So, you know, I hope that increasingly more and more people will, more and more businesses will become supportive of this. But yeah, look, we're all humans, we all have our challenges in life, and as a business, I believe it's our responsibility as CEOs to provide an environment where we support our employees in any way we can. That's how we get the best out of our staff, and it's how we get the best results as a business, as well as it's just a nice thing to do, right? So that's my view.
Yeah, and I think parents are not limited to being biological parents, like adoptive parents, and everybody should get support. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Nam. I think it's 100% right. Like I say, everyone is different. Everyone's having a different environment, and we mustn't just think about there are men and there are women and there are mothers and there are fathers, right? It's broader than that. And as you say, there are people who, of course, adopt and foster, and lots of other models out there. And we need to make sure that we support people, whatever lifestyle they're leading. That's none of our business. We need to just, this is not for us as companies to decide how people live their lives. That's up to them. It's our responsibility as a business to make sure we support them in living their lives as much as we can. So that's there we go.
Yeah, I hope all the mothers have a good Mother's Day, and people appreciate their mothers despite a day or anything. Like in India, we don't celebrate these days, but there's every day is Mother's Day, every day is Children's Day. So yeah, I like that approach better. It has a lot less pressure on you. So
yeah, nice way to do it. I mean, you're right. Every day, appreciate your mother, and actually, to say your wife, if she's your mother, and your grandmother, and everyone, appreciate them every day, certainly. But I think these days are important to bring attention to a specific message at a specific time. But anyway, yeah, great. So yeah, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there.
Yeah, thank you for talking to me. And we'll see you all next week.
Yeah, great stuff.
The next week.
Yeah, excellent. All right, lovely. Thanks, Nam.